Bună ziua și foarte bine că ați dat click. Mai credeți în ce spun sau în ce scriu jurnaliștii? Aveți vreo metodă pentru a discerne între știrile false și știrile știri, adică cele adevărate? Sau mai mult, vi s-a întâmplat și vouă omenește să vedeți o imagine sau un text pe internet și să vă întrebați dacă e sau nu adevărată? O să vorbim astăzi despre cei care nu prea au genul ăsta de probleme. Finlanda e de mulți ani pe locul întâi între țările europene în ceea ce privește rezistența la dezinformare și la alfabetizarea media. Succesul acesta nu e doar rezultatul unui sistem educațional puternic, care oricum e unul dintre cele mai bune din lume, ci și rezultatul unui efort național de a învăța pe finlandezi ce sunt știrile false. Alfabetizarea media face parte din programa națională de bază, începând cu învățământul preșcolar. Leo Pekala e director adjunct al Institutului Național al Audiovizualului din Finlanda și e șeful Departamentului de Educație Media, o autoritate guvernamentală din cadrul Ministerului Educației și Culturii. Din această poziție, el este coordonatorul programelor de educație media la nivel național. L-am invitat să ne vorbească pur și simplu despre cum citesc finlandezii știrile. Iar într-o țară în care încă există oameni care se întreabă dacă există sau nu chipuri în băuturile carbogazoase, poate că am putea să învățăm ceva din modelul finlandez. Leo Pekala, thank you for joining us. I'm gonna start this interview straight away. Why are fake news cool? Or at least cooler than real news?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this interview. And to answer your question, I would say that fake news can actually be cool if they are being used as a learning material, so that we can use fake news to teach people of all ages to understand how fake news are being made and for what they are being made. So, and sometimes bad fake news, badly made fake news can be excellent learning materials. Otherwise, of course, they're not so cool.
But there are some pieces of news that catch your attention and you get to wonder, is this real? Is this fake?
Well, I think that's actually one of the essential questions when we talk about media literacy and what we want to achieve by promoting media literacy and educating people to become more media literate. So that is exactly the question that we need to ask. That's why is this so interesting? How has this been made? For whom this has been made, and who has made this for what purposes? Is there something that someone wants me to believe, and should I maybe check the same thing from some other source? So those are the basic questions that we need to ask when we start to talk about critical thinking and media literacy.
Finland has a successful example of combating misinformation through education. Please tell me, how do you do it?
In Finnish educational system, media literacy is embedded into the national core curricula. That means, and I also have to say that media literacy is not a school subject of its own. It is a part of all school subjects, and it starts already from the kindergarten, early childhood education. After that, it goes up to the secondary level of education, and it is part of every teacher or educator's work. Not, of course, every day, not all the time, but everyone has to do something about it and teach and discuss with children about different aspects, whether it is about, let's say, in mathematics, it could be, for example, discussing about programming and algorithms, how they are forming the social media content that we see, or in history, easily it could be, for example, about political disinformation campaigns, what we used to call in history propaganda, but now we talk about disinformation and fake news. So there are many places where educators can actually do media literacy education, or media education as we call it also.
Are these lessons organized for different age groups, as in for kindergarten you give certain examples, for high school students there are other examples.
Yes, exactly as you say, that if you think of young children, you start with different types of playing activities that, for example, very young children can take pictures of what they see in their daily environment, and then they show the pictures to the other children and tell about them. So that is actually kind of very simple form of making a story, or they can take a short video clip and explain what is in there. And then later on, when the children grow up and their thinking develops, and their like abstract thinking develops more, so then you get to more advanced things. So the students learn to make journalistic articles. They learn to understand how journalists, for example, work. How do you need to find background information, and then you learn how to choose pictures. So what do you get into the picture, what you leave out. So they learn to understand that also all the news that we consider like properly journalistically made news are always like a product of a long process that has included many choices. So that way, children learn to understand that when they see something very strange on social media, for example, and they kind of recognize that this doesn't sound, for example, this doesn't sound true. So maybe I check, can I find it from some media site that I trust, for example. And so that kind of simple examples, but as you said, they grow more advanced by the age when the children and students they grow older.
But what do you do with adults that become victims of disinformation or malinformation? Is there this risk?
Adults are a challenge, really, I think, for all of us everywhere in Europe, because it is easy to reach children and young people who are in the education system, because then we can tell teachers that, okay, you should do this and talk about these issues. But when we talk about working age adults and then senior citizens, we need to have different ways of reaching these people. And again, there's no simple solution and only one solution to reach adult part of the population. One thing that we do in Finland is that we work together in cooperation with very different kinds of organizations. And for example, a lot of non-governmental organizations are doing volunteer work with adults and senior citizens, talking about fake news and disinformation and these issues. So you need to have multiple solutions and multiple approaches to reach these different groups.
Are there fact-checking groups?
Yes, we do have some fact-checking groups, but fact-checking is something that we see that is not really the solution for the problem, because however many fact checkers you would have, it's impossible to fact check everything. If you think of like just one day and the amount of information we go through during just one day, it can be hundreds of different stories or headlines that we see in different types of media. It would be impossible to any organization to do like real fact checking. What our fact-checking organization, which is a non-governmental organization, by the way, what they are doing is that they take examples of stories and then they kind of fact-check them properly and then publish the whole process. And they show that, okay, for example, this story said that this and that has happened. And then they check facts from different sources and tell that, okay, yes, this happened, but it didn't go as it was said in this story. And so by explaining like sample stories, and in some occasions, for example, before elections or after elections, they may say that, okay, check, for example, what some politician has said and do fact checking. And that way they, again, do their part of media education, as we say that. So that's also one part, an important part. But as I said, I don't think fact checking is the solution. We need to really educate everyone, all of us, because yeah.
But this is a long-term solution. We're having this dialogue mostly because misinformation and disinformation have become more prevalent lately in Romania, and trust in news media is near a record low. How do you assess trust in traditional media in Finland?
Well, interestingly, in Finland, we know from studies that Finnish people trust the media very much. We also trust our government, we trust the politicians, and that is based on the understanding of how our democratic society works. And that starts from the school. So we learn at school how the political system works, and what kind of like basic rights we have, like freedom of speech and freedom of opinion. But we also learn about the journalistic process. So we know that we have like the journalists follow an ethical code for journalists, and there's an independent study organization that you can complain if you think that, for example, some journalist has just made up a story or hasn't checked all the facts, and then this independent body checks the story, and the media has to publish the results. So there are systems that are working, and people know that if you are reading news from certain media house, you can trust that, okay, this has been properly done by following the journalistic code. And that way most people would also know that, okay, if they see something which is not coming from a media source that they like media house that they know, they would actually check that from other sources in most cases if it's something that looks strange or suspicious.
But is there the case that a good journalist might publish something that's not true?
Of course, I mean, sometimes that happens. But as I said, that there is this media board, which is actually like a voluntary board formed by the media companies in Finland, so newspapers and TV channels, and they all have agreed that they will follow this journalistic code. But if this media board finds out that there's a story or a journalist that hasn't actually done something correctly, then the original media outlet has to publish the correction and also the verdict of the media board that, okay, now and on that day we published a story that wasn't actually based on true facts and they kind of have to apologize for that and correct the story properly.
So you're saying that both this system of checks and balances and the role of media literacy has a strong impact in terms of democracy and transparency in society.
Yes, exactly. I think transparency is really one key element of promoting and keeping up a democratic system. So we really need to respect the freedom of speech, but also we need to respect the transparency and for example, we are a government office, so everything we do and publish is available, and people can inquire about it, and there's nothing secret that we do. So it's open and public, and it seems that in Finland, for example, that we have managed still to be one of the top countries in the transparency index, where different countries are compared. So it's part of the democratic process that we really think is valuable.
This program of media literacy started in 2004, so more than 20 years ago. Are journalists more responsible?
I think journalists in Finland have for a very long time been highly qualified, highly trained. Most of them have studied journalism at the university, and so we know that they are taking their work seriously, and we have very little of that kind of what you would call maybe like a yellow press. The media houses are recognized and known. You also have to remember that we are a small country, only 5.5 million people, and there are not that many media houses, media companies that are producing news, for example. And our language is also another thing, that Finnish language is also only spoken by Finns. So it's also kind of a small, isolated world in terms of media content, and it's not so easy for anybody from outside to actually, for example, start a disinformation campaign.
Well, as far as I understand, this media literacy policy started as a reaction to Russian propaganda that can easily translate its narratives into Finnish language. I want to ask you, what does Russian propaganda look like in Finland? What are the main narratives?
Okay, I need to correct you because we don't think that we have started this work because of Russian propaganda. That's actually not the case. We have started it because we want people to be more media literate in general. And actually, generally speaking, we are getting fairly little of Russian propaganda compared to many other countries that are even our neighbors in southern parts of Europe. I don't really know why, but I think it is actually that it's not very easy to create a successful story. And it's not only about the language, but it's also that people are well educated and people follow news. And even if we know now that, for example, young people follow news mostly from different social media apps that they use, for example, like TikTok or whatever they use, but the media houses are still producing content also for those social media sites. And as I said, that everyone learns at school that what are the kind of, for example, our public broadcasting service, which is tax-funded media service, that they recognize that, okay, this is coming from there, and they know that they can trust the source. So as I said, we don't get that much Russian propaganda, at least nothing that would actually spread really widely or be successful.
Okay, if Russian propaganda is at a lower level in Finland, I want to ask you if there are extremist political leaders or whatever candidates that use misinformation to win the sympathy of their voters.
Well, we do have our kind of like right-wing populistic party. Well, within the party, I wouldn't say that they are extremists, but they are definitely populistic, and some of them are very skilled in social media, and they have some really right-wing ideas, but mostly like and they are actually, we have a right-wing populistic party in our government at the moment. They got about close to 20% of the votes in the last parliamentary elections. But now they are in the governmental responsibility, so they still have to take care of all the usual business that governments have to do. They have individual politicians who may every now and then even spread some disinformation, but the party officially is not doing it. Then another thing completely, of course, is that we do have people, like a minority of people who try to spread different conspiracy theories, for example. But it's a relatively small group of people that are actually doing that. And then the number of people who would actually believe that kind of disinformation or conspiracy theories is very low.
Well, for comparison, the fact that Romania is a fertile ground for fake news is no surprise for anyone here. I want to ask you, why do you think this is happening? What makes a country a fertile ground for fake news?
I think these are really so complex things, and it's a combination of political history and educational structures, and how all these things are working in a democratic and open society. It's a question of education, educational level of people in general, and then, but it's connected to different aspects of our lives. I think, like, if you have more or less like stable economy and everybody is doing more or less okay, you have good education, and there's work for most of people, and so the society is functioning properly, and you can so you can start to build the trust. And as I said, in our system, I think the success that we have had is that we have had a good free education system for a long time, and that has been supporting the creation of the kind of open democracy that we have now. And one part of the democracy, of course, is, like I said, that you have to allow different kinds of political opinions. So, for example, the right-wing populistic opinions, as long as they are not breaking the law. So then you allow that. Democracy means that you also allow different opinions, but everyone has to follow the rules and follow the law. So I think that's important.
Well, so the fake news industry is rather a symptom of a society that's not working too well. Is it efficient to first address this fake news problem, or to better build a solid, trustful society?
Well, my answer would be that it takes time, and there's no simple solution. But I think education is really key to all of this. So because that's how we build the members to our society, that we educate our children and young people to become members of the society, and we educate them to understand how democracy works and what type of elements you have in that, and how you build trust, and how you respect the human rights and other constitutional rights that we have. So I think it takes time. It's a long process, and there's definitely no simple solution. And like I said, that there's no silver bullet to solve the problem instantly, and that's why it is so complex and difficult to address. But I think you need to develop the system as a whole, and with all different parts, and no one can do it alone. Also, that you need different different sectors in the society also to understand that this is also an important part of strengthening the democracy, that you need to make sure that people understand something about media literacy.
Let's gather all this together and try to create a guideline for the Romanian public to discern between credible news and disinformation attempts. What should we pay attention to?
I think the only way to learn to do that is really to use different types of sources. Of course, you don't need to do it all the time and with every story that you read. But if it's something really important, for example, related to the politics of the country, and then you see very different stories. So maybe my advice would be that check at least some other information source and see if you get the same story from different types of sources. And then you can form your own opinion based on what you read.
Double checking is key, so
I think that's really like what we can do. It's a very practical thing that we all can do. So and it's not very complicated. So you just go to other site that's and check that, do you see the same story everywhere? And if it's fake or if it's disinformation, so you'll soon find out that there are many other sources that are saying a different or producing a completely different story, and then you have to think that what is it that you believe?
Mr. Leo Pecala, hoping that Romanian public would learn something from the Finnish model. Thank you for this dialogue.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Vă mulțumesc și dumneavoastră că ne-ați urmărit. Laurențiu Ungureanu din studio, Ovidiu Popica, Adi Iacob și Cristina Lazar. Pe curând! Mulțumim că ne-ați urmărit! Dacă v-am ajutat să aveți o părere mai informată despre cei care ne conduc și despre faptele lor, ajutați-ne să ajungem la cât mai multă lume. Iar pentru sugestii și reclamații, lăsați-ne un mesaj în comentarii sau pe mail. Noi ne revedem joi, dar știrile continuă pe hotnews.ro.